Coming up on show 668, VW says car makers could face the same fate as Nokia, and that came from the very top of the company. Plus, we're talking about Foxconn and Fiat Chrysler doing a deal. The plug-in electric car numbers are out for Germany for the end of the year. You'll be surprised. Volvo building a battery plant in the US. The Leaf gets cheaper and the Bolt heads to China. Those stories and a lot more coming up on your show today. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are in the world, welcome to EV News Daily for Thursday, 16th of January. Martyn Lee here, going through every EV story that I can, picking out the highlights and saving you time. Thank you to MOIA.com for helping make this show, and thank you to MyEV.com and Evernex and Inside EVs for all getting together to put on a big event in Miami in February. It's going to be a massive deal for anyone in the area, even on the East Coast that can get to it, maybe do a road trip to it. I'll give you the details later in the week about that, but you can get your name down for it. Let's talk about the headline then. The Volkswagen CEO bringing up the fates of Nokia in the same sentence as legacy car makers. Volkswagen needs to accelerate the overhaul of its business to avoid becoming another Nokia, which lost its dominance in the handset market when Apple came around. The phone was too expensive, said Microsoft. Nobody wants to be downloading apps, they said. Even Steve Jobs said that, by the way. If those that are long memory, the first iPhone, no app store. Well, he relented pretty quickly when he saw the possibilities of the App Store, and look what happened. But also, many people said, look, we just don't need the iPhone. My flip phone, my dumb phone is fine. And then Nokia went away. Well, the German carmakers chief executive Herbert Diess has been reported by Reuters as saying that VW will cut resources that they had previously devoted to fuel cell vehicles because they won't be as competitive as battery electric drivetrains for at least a decade. VW also slashing costs at its mobility services unit as they try and get match fit for the revolution that began a long time ago but is here and now in 2020. Well, Herbert Diess said this, and I quote, "The big question is, are we fast enough? If we continue at our current speed, it's going to be very tough. The era of the classic car maker is over. In summary, this is probably the most difficult challenge Volkswagen has ever faced." End quote. Wow, did you hear that? That's amazing. This is the head of VW saying the phrase, the era of the classic car maker is over. And you know what? EVs have done that. They've forced their hand into making clean, green, brilliant, fast, fun electric cars that they just didn't want to do because all of their money was tied up, for now at least, in the supply chains, the factories that build the engines and the gearboxes and the cars and the processes. They didn't want this change, but it's been forced upon them by many things. Some people blame Elon Musk, and some people blame climate activists. Some people blame even our politicians for not doing either enough or doing too much. There's many factors involved, but you've got to say actually that recent events in Australia and the change of climate and the things that we're seeing now, you can't say we weren't warned. You know, I think about when I went to school, so I was at school kind of doing those. When you start to get more specific subjects. I remember doing, it'll be late 80s, early 90s, doing lessons at school on climate change. You can't say that we weren't given enough warning. Wow, even VW's boss, Herbert Diess, saying, look, if we don't sort this out, we're going to be the new Nokia. Now, the reason why I have so much optimism for VW, and yes, they've done some stinky, cruddy things in the past, and yes, long-time listeners of the show know I tell this story about how I owned a VW when Dieselgate happened. I got the recall notice, I took it back to the dealer, had to go get it sorted out. Not that they did anything wrong, of course, that's their line. In America, they did something very, very wrong because there was rules in place to stop them doing it, but because they didn't technically break any rules here in Europe, because we didn't write the rules for them to break, we thought nobody would actually do something that grotty. I have to be careful what I say on the podcast, but I think it's fair to say that they have turned a corner. At least at the top of the company, they've turned a corner anyway. And when you see Herbert Diess on stage with Elon Musk at events, when Elon talks about him on Twitter as well, VW certainly seems like it's in good hands now. And I'm inclined to try and give all automakers the benefit of the doubt, even now, as stories about Dieselgate continue to come out almost on a weekly basis. They've all done some incredibly cruddy things. All of them have got their hands dirty with this, literally, with disgusting, dirty emissions. Let's move on. And we go from one story about VW's boss saying, hey, look, we've got to change or we'll be the new Nokia, to this next story, which juxtaposes nicely. The iPhone manufacturer Foxconn has gone into a deal to make EVs with the Italian-American automaking giant Fiat Chrysler, FCA. Well, there you go. There's a great example of a car maker looking around and going, look, we need some help with this. And going to a very, very high-tech company like Foxconn. Foxconn announced on Thursday that the two companies will combine forces to make EVs for the Chinese market. FCA handling the manufacturing and the Taiwanese tech giant managing the electronics and software, writes The Verge. They say that FCA, which oversees brands like Jeep and Dodge, has lagged behind their competitors in EV technology. They recently kicked off a merger with the French automaker PSA Group. That would mean cars like Peugeot and Citroën brands could be merging technology. Partly, again, that was in order to attack the changing automotive landscape. A lot of these mergers could be happening, and actually demergers as well. We look at like the love-in between Renault and Nissan may well be coming to an end. And what does that mean for the electric cars that they're making? There's going to be some turbulent times coming up this year. Let's move on. From Inside EV's sales scorecard, the German numbers are in for the end of the year. Passenger plug-in electric car sales in Germany doubled in December, reaching the second highest monthly level ever of 11,328 new registrations. That is up 98%. Should we call it 100? It's between friends. You and I are friends. Up 100% year over year. We can ignore the 2%. The market share also improved to a near record level, standing at 4% of the market. 1 in every 25 new passenger cars had a plug socket on it. 2019 ended with 108,000 new passenger plug-in car registrations in Germany, which makes the country the biggest European market for EVs right now. Yes, of course, Norway is still the leader kind of per capita because it's a small country with a ton of EVs in it, but Germany has finally overtaken to be the biggest European market for EVs. That happened in 2019. That looks set to continue as well. The year-over-year growth was 61%, while the average market share, the average over the year, is at 3%. I'll pop a link to Inside EVs if you want to read more. Volvo will build its own US battery assembly plant as it readies itself a line of electric vehicles for the market. The expansion is part of a previously announced $600 million project the Swedish automaker begun at its plant in Ridgeville, which included a second production line and the Volvo Car University. And that is in an article coming from autonews.com, who says that Volvo will create a pure electric version of the XC90 SUV/crossover and build it at that plant starting in late 2022. The factory is 45 miles northwest of Charleston, employs about 1,500 workers building the S60 sedan. The South Carolina plant is going to become the global production centre for the third gen XC90 we're going to get that in 3 years' time though, aren't we? And what's the EV market going to look like in 3 years' time? But I tell you what, I would love any kind of electric Volvo. I think they are great cars. The Polestars are nice, but just your regular Volvos, stick a big old battery in them and do any. The styling is nice. The Swedes have really got it sorted out. A car that could do with some love in some people's eyes is the Nissan Leaf. No longer the front runner of EVs, Nissan knows it as well. Nissan, though, have been busy with boardroom battles and Carlos Ghosn making the headlines. Some would say a little bit too distracted because they haven't invested enough in the Nissan Leaf, say some. However, instead of introducing major changes to the Leaf, Nissan's pushing for a cheaper price in order to remain on people's shopping lists. According to Pedro at Push EVs, he says that now Nissan has introduced a cheaper entry-level trim. The entry-level trim now has got not only a cheaper price, but it's got a slower 3.6 kilowatt onboard charger. They've done away with the dual USB ports in the back, some other changes as well. The price difference in some countries is pretty big. In others, it varies, you see. The new entry-level trim in Spain is 25,900 euros, and that's like 4,000 euros cheaper than the next trim level up, which is a good jump. In other countries, the difference between the cheapest and the next one up is kind of small and might not even be worth going for the cheap one, considering what you get for your extra money. And what are they going to do with battery sizes? Nissan Leaf now 62 kilowatt hours, but still without active thermal management from a liquid cooling system. They say it's got thermal management, but what they mean is the way that it's designed, the way that the air moves over it when the car is running, all those kind of things. Kind of active, liquid cooled, or even heated thermal management on the battery. And that, I must admit, in 2020 going forward, as much as I love the Leaf, never owned one, but I do love the Leaf, does start to play on your mind a little bit. Are Nissan starting to go in a different direction? Maybe this year. There are some new battery chemistries coming out, by the way. There's some different cell chemistries coming out. Once again, more power, more efficiency in the same physical size. So you could end up with a kind of a late 70, like a 78 kilowatt hour Nissan Leaf in exactly the same footprint for the battery because of new cell technology that's coming online. But will they go for that? Will they invest in that? Would they go for a new technology that does include active thermal management? Will they stick with CHAdeMO, the plug socket? Almost certainly, because it's Japanese. But do the Japanese want to be making EVs? Well, you'd say that Honda are going to do a really good stab at that with the Honda E this year. But what about Nissan? Don't the Japanese ideologically want fuel cell vehicles? Do they even want full EVs? Lots of questions. I see so many different opinions on Twitter. I try and soak them all up and try and give you a balanced view. The Leaf for now is still a great car, and if you can get it even cheaper, that's great news. Let's move on. And the Chevrolet Bolt is headed to China. Spy photos of what appeared to be the Bolt EV showed up in China. Some different front end and rear end updates circulated last week. Auto blogs surmised that GM was working on something around the Bolt and maybe a crossover in China. Now, according to Motor1.com, who published a story quoting the Chinese site Auto Home, what GM have done is they have applied to sell an electric SUV under the Velite 7 nameplate in China. Velite 7. It's a little differentiating the Velite 7's exterior from the Bolt. The bumpers are different, the badges, extra ground clearance. Up front, the bow tie is replaced by a round Buick badge, and the bumper picks up an almost kind of Prius-like appearance with some contrasting vertical elements and a thin grille bleeding into the headlights. Maybe some other tech changes as well, because you know if it's going to be on sale in China, Buick name, it's going to have to be cheap. They're going to have to find some savings. So maybe a little different motor, less horsepower. We'll see. We'll try and find out the tech details on that. Well, Tesla has responded to a handful of small protests in Germany. Local protests at the site of Gigafactory 4 outside Berlin. They've opened a community office. And the reason they've done that is they want to hear about local concerns. According to the Der Spiegel report, the office opened today, on Thursday, only a few days after the protests began. I mean, Tesla operate at breakneck speed. Some people start to protest, and immediately they're opening an office, they're taking people on, they've got employees there wanting to talk to the protesters. About 50 of them gathered at the Gigafactory site at one point. They say their main concern was about the lack of public participation in planning for the project. Tesla's community office is going to hear those public concerns, and they hope that the opening of that will help relax the situation. between the protesters and the work Tesla are already doing. It's a very, very good thing to do, to be shown, to be listening. And you hope that if they've got some valid concerns, Tesla take them on board as well. But wow, that's a quick reaction. And finally, yesterday on the podcast, we talked about some previous guests on this show. EO Charging and Octopus have been on the show as my guests in the past on a Saturday special. Another company that I featured a while ago now called MOIA. At the time, we were talking about their home battery storage, but they also had some very, very clever stuff up their sleeve with Honda. And now we can talk about it. My guest on the show at the time was I think he's CTO still. He was at the time, Chris Wright. You meet those people in life who you just know. Well, I've met, when you meet these people, normally engineers or tech people, like he seemed like he had about 3 brains, all working on 3 different projects at once in the background, and we're still having a conversation with me. I mean, a supremely intelligent person. It and really dumbed things down for me. And, when we did the interview, really explained what the kind of stuff they were working on. Maybe goodness, it could even be 18 months ago now. Well, Honda and MOIA have teamed up to launch the first fruit of their pan-European cooperation. And yes, at the time, on the day I turned up, he actually had I think it was a group of the Japanese were in the office, and I felt completely guilty. I was like, I'll come back another day. You're busy. He's like, no, it's fine. I'll make time for you. Such a nice company, a nice guy as well. Didn't need to talk to a little podcast about their technology on a very, very busy day when the Japanese delegation were there. Like I say, it's going back a long time now. Smart chargers with vehicle-to-grid technology have now been installed in London's borough of Islington. And it could foretell a future of bidirectional charging via the CCS plug, says Electrive. For now, the collaboration between Honda and MOIA see smart charging stations located the parking spaces of Islington Council, with more to come. Honda are working with a Swiss partner, EV Tech, for the design of these, and it's a more compact version of vehicle-to-grid capable charging stations. And it offers CHAdeMO and CCS. Well, CCS is a novelty that Honda claims in the future they will be able to offer bidirectional capability over CCS. And technically, it can be done once the Honda.HE arrives this summer. They're working on it now. For the time being, however, the fleet of ENV 200s that the council run are going to be charging on CHAdeMO, of course, but bidirectionally charging over a 12-month period. And they'll monitor this. It's a trial they're doing, and they can push energy back into the grid at 10 kilowatts, and of course use the chargers to then take energy from the grid in order to charge when it's clean and green and cheap, and put back into the grid when they need to do that. Fantastic project, one of the things they're working on. And like I say, if you want to listen to any of the previous interviews and Saturday specials I've done with people over the years, you can just use my blog, evnewsdaily.com, use the search box and find it. I really should go along and update that interview with MOIA. Great group of people doing some very, very interesting things. Right, let's talk about question of the week set by myv.com this week. And I'll read out your answers on Sunday. Give you a name check and read it out. Which car company would you like to see doing more to embrace electrification, and why? Which car company would you like to see doing more to embrace electrification? And tell me why as well. You can email me hello@evnewsdaily.com, leave a comment on YouTube or on socials. Well, thank you to the 228 patrons of the podcast. Without you, we couldn't bring this news to the thousands of people who listen every single day. Patreon is patreon.com. If you do /EVNewsDaily, you'll see my page. And if you want to support, more than welcome. Absolutely no pressure to if you don't want to. There are 667 previous shows in the archive. The blog's evnewsdaily.com. The premium partners of the show are Phil Roberts of Electric Future, Brad Crosby and Avid Technology. If you want to catch up on the socials, search EV News Daily. In the meantime, have a wonderful day. I'll catch you tomorrow. And remember, there is no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.